What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I just want to talk a little Jamel Herring versus Shakur Stevenson. This isn't the actual full preview. We'll do that as we get closer to the fight date, but I'm just happy that they made Jamel Herring versus Shakur Stevenson for Jamel Herring's WBO Junior-Lightweight title. This fight's taking place October 23rd, barring any postponement, cancellation, COVID-related, injury-related, or otherwise. But this is just one of the rare cases where divisionally, the top fighters who need to be fighting for this title are under the same promotional banner. They're both with Top Rank in this case. As would the winner of this fight versus Oscar Valdez would both be on Top Rank. So not only is this fight, but the WBC title holder Oscar Valdez, who's waiting in the wings, he just had his title defense against Conceição in a very controversial fight, both in the ring and out of the ring prior to the fight due to PED positive tests and the WBC allowing that fight to continue. Well, Oscar Valdez is currently the WBC champ and stands to fight against the winner of Jamel Herring versus Shakur Stevenson. So that all breaks very nicely divisionally, promotionally. This is one of those cases. Now, when you factor in other guys like Chris Colbert, who's a very promising prospect at 130 as well, that's another issue. He's with PBC. Gervonta Davis is also with PBC, but he relinquished his 130-pound title. He was a WBA super champion at 130. He relinquished that. It looks like he's going to be fighting at 135 or 140 going forward, so he's no longer in the 130 mix. I was looking at him as being the top of that division, but he appears to be moving on. So Jamel Herring versus Shakur Stevenson, I love that it's happening because for a moment, around the time Jamel Herring was about to defend his WBO title against Carl Frampton, there was talk that if he beat Frampton, that would, one, be the biggest feather in Jamel Herring's cap, but also because him and Shakur Stevenson have a friendly-ish relationship. Jamel Herring's trained by Bomac, that's Terrence Crawford's trainer. Shakur Stevenson is close with Terrence Crawford as well, so Herring and Stevenson have had friendly dealings. They're not like buddy-buddy, but they've been cool enough where there was even talk that maybe Jamel Herring would just relinquish his WBO title after defending it successfully against Carl Frampton, essentially to either move to 135 or just pursue something else while also making way to allow Shakur Stevenson to fight for that WBO title, just not with Jamel Herring defending it. That would have been pretty weak if that ended up being the case. I'm glad that they're actually going to settle this in the ring. And I just want to start off by saying, as I'm starting to think about this fight and look at it a little bit more deeply, I'm just blown away by the betting lines. Now, I get it. Shakur Stevenson is one of the most hyped and respected prospects out of this whole new crop that was coming up. Devin Haney, Teofimo Lopez, who's, obviously done great things, outstanding things in beating Lomachenko. Devin Haney, like I said, he's been coming up, just had the biggest win of his career versus Jorge Linares. Gervonta Davis is a few years older. Ryan Garcia, that was another one. And Virgil Ortiz Jr., a couple divisions up. You've basically got this new wave of very exciting and talented prospects. Jerome Boots Ennis up at 147 as well. Well, unlike Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia, Gervonta Davis, and Teofimo Lopez, who are all at 135, Shakur Stevenson was a couple divisions below them at 126. He even won a vacant title at 126. He won the WBO Featherweight belt against Joet Gonzalez, who's actually going to be Emmanuel Neverett's next title defense at Featherweight. But since winning that WBO Featherweight title, Shakur Stevenson, and look, I don't think all champions are equal, nor should they be viewed equally. Some people get a title by beating a legitimate champion, well-respected, everybody knows that this is the man, and you beat him and take the title that way. That's one type of champion. There's another type of champion that, wins it in a vacant title bout against somebody who, people don't really know about and isn't an elite fighter or isn't even a near elite fighter, at least not at that point. Joet Gonzalez, not an elite fighter, even though he just had the biggest win of his career versus Miguel Mariaga, but he's not an elite fighter at this point. But that's who Shakur Stevenson won the WBO featherweight title again. So still has to do, he's looking very promising, but he really hasn't proven anything. Even in his last couple wins against Toka Khan Clary and Jeremiah Nakathila. Nakathila, by the way, got Shakur Stevenson attention a couple times with that right hand. Nakathila is super right hand heavy. That's basically all he's looking for in the fight, is to throw that right hand. If all else fails, throw it again, and then throw it again. Look at Nakathila's fights. Well, he lost, just about every round against Stevenson, but he had a couple moments that made it sort of exciting where he really tagged Stevenson with that right hand. But as I'm looking at Herring versus Shakur Stevenson, my early thoughts are, what is up with this betting line? Shakur Stevenson is going off at a minus 550 in some books, minus 600, minus 714. I've seen him on like Bet365. Well, that basically means that Shakur Stevenson against the champ, who's got more experience than Stevenson. And I'm not talking about, I know Stevenson has sparred with the best of them, sparred with Terrence Crawford, sparred with Gervonta Davis, Teofimo Lopez, Devin Haney. He sparred with everybody. And again, he's one of the most respected young names in the game. But we're talking about a durable champion who had to go through the rigors of a couple losses. He lost to Ladarius Miller. That's the last time Herring lost. And that was like in 2017. And then there was a 2016 10th round TKO loss for Jamel Herring against Denis Shafikov. Again, 2016, 5 years ago. So he had to take his lumps, but then he beat Masayuki Ito and Lamont Roach Jr. And then obviously he just defended his WBO belt against Carl Frampton. So Jamel Herring's actually proven a lot more in the ring professionally than Shakur Stevenson. However, Shakur Stevenson is the one who they're billing and who's going off at a 5-1 to 7-1 favorite against Jamel Herring. So regardless of who you think is probably going to win this fight, you might want to look at some of that action, just betting-wise, given the crazy lopsided odds. Well, this is a case of southpaw versus southpaw. Jamel Herring actually has a height advantage. It's 5'10 against Shakur Stevenson's 5'8, along with a 71-inch reach, I believe, or maybe 70-inch reach. Yes, a 70-inch reach against a 68-inch reach for Shakur Stevenson. And by the way, I said 5'8 for Stevenson. He's been listed at both 5'7 and 5'8. So needless to say, Jamel Herring's got a couple inches in height and a couple inches in reach against Stevenson. So I'm just thinking, it's really not a foregone conclusion that Stevenson wins this. Granted, if this ends up being a super close fight or something, I can't help but just, I've just seen too much boxing where the gut in me can't help but think Stevenson's going to be awarded maybe some of the close rounds. So Jamel Herring, sometimes he's looking very impressive, like he did against Carl Frampton. He got roughed up a bit against Jonathan Okendo, where there was a DQ, and it looked like Jamel Herring had the option to continue fighting, but ended up not wanting to do so, therefore taking the DQ. And a lot of people criticized Jamel Herring heavily after that. A lot of people already forgot about that, but going into that Herring versus Frampton fight, people were questioning Jamel Herring's heart and spirit and grit because of how he seemingly opted for the DQ win against Jonathan Okendo, who again was coming in trying to rough him up. Well, that's not Shakur Stevenson's style. Shakur Stevenson is a master technician. He's fighting from the outside. He's a total sweet science guy where, like Devin Haney and maybe Demetrius Andrade, that could work for you tremendously in some regards. I mean, Floyd Mayweather, to a large degree, was a sweet science guy, even though early in Floyd's career, he was knocking a lot of people out. Don't get it twisted. Well, even in this early stage of Shakur Stevenson's career, he's not really recording a lot of knockouts. Like, for him to win his fights, he basically has to, command the action throughout the course of 12 rounds. Now, that can get you a lot of wins, but, when you start fighting the upper echelon, where you've got some just killer knockout artists like, Ryan Garcia. Not saying that Ryan Garcia, I think, would beat Shakur Stevenson, but I'm just saying you got guys like Garcia and Teofimo Lopez, Gervonta Davis, who will get you out of there with one or a few punches. That's not the case with Shakur Stevenson. His thing is beating you down, breaking you down, deconstructing you over the course of several rounds, and, maybe picking up the TKO win or knockout win at some point. But it's basically after totally outclassing you. Well, Jamel Herring isn't exactly a one-punch knockout artist himself. Yes, he did end up knocking Carl Frampton out in the 6th round, dropped him multiple times, but, I mean, he was just landing super clean shots that Frampton just was not prepared to start handling. It looked like a couple of them, they were thrown in combinations where, because of the timing and because of how flustered Frampton was by Jamel Herring's jab, up to the point where Jamel Herring was able to land, straight left hands and just deck Carl Frampton. So if you don't see the punch coming, of course, Herring will get you out of there, but it's more likely that he's going to outclass you on the road to a decision win. I mean, before that Frampton win and before the DQ win against Okendo, Herring's last 4 fights were all unanimous decision wins. So I really think that Herring versus Stevenson is probably going to go the distance. The question is, who's going to be controlling the action? Well, again, Stevenson's going to have to account for giving up a couple inches here. So he's going to have to, close the distance somewhat. And he's also going to have to throw Herring off with feints and timing and different techniques to be able to open Herring up to clean shots. I don't see Herring going down quietly here. Like, the fact that he, accepted this challenge, this title defense, and he's going to go through with it, I don't think that Herring's looking at it like, hey, I'm 35 years old, which he is, which is very up there, especially in these lower weight classes. But I don't think that he's going to look at this like, I've already done my work as a professional. I'm, willing to give this title up to this youngin who's basically going to be the next torch carrier for the future generations. Not to say that before that win against Frampton, Herring was looked at as a generational talent. He's never been looked at as a generational talent. He has, if anything, kind of overachieved professionally, which is one of the reasons why a lot of people are going with the former Olympic silver medalist Shakur Stevenson here. And my early thoughts, again, I'm going to do a fuller, more complete and comprehensive breakdown leading into the fight, but my early thoughts are that I think it's going to be a pretty slow start. No one's going to really take command of the fight throughout, through the first 3 to 4 rounds. I think they might even split the first 4 rounds or so. But Jamel Herring has gone the distance a few times, but he is 35 years old, and I expect Stevenson to start controlling some of the action in the middle to late rounds to where he can win. And I'm going to take a deeper look, but right now my early thoughts is that Stevenson earns kind of an 8 rounds to 4 unanimous decision, maybe a split decision, but because of those other reasons where I think that the close rounds are going to slide to Stevenson, I kind of think Stevenson's going to win a competitive and close, but somewhat clear, or even if it's unclear, it's going to be clear on the scorecards, 8 to 4, we're talking 116 to 112 type of decision win. At least that's how I see it right now. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think of Jamel Herring versus Shakur Stevenson for the WBO title currently held by Jamel Herring? Who do you think is going to win this one and why? And do you also agree that Stevenson is probably going to be awarded the close rounds? Not to just call out conspiracy or anything like that, but I just feel like there's a tendency to kind of give it to the guy who's got the juice in terms of the energized name in the sport. There's just a tendency to do that, and I don't think that this will be an exception. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.